kind of as one submission, since they're all very similar. And that's the agenda. There's copies probably near the door. Did you put copies over there? Okay. Nope, not yet. Here.
You don't give me something I'm not supposed to have.
Having said that, Peter's with us tonight because there was a conflict with the prior legal representation due to a conflict of interest. And having said that, if we could start tonight, Peter, could you just please give the board a little bit of the purview of understanding that the cell towers are, required necessity and a good need for the community, but what our purview is as far as what we can do and can't do as far as recommendations and so forth.
So generally speaking, wireless towers like this have been treated by the courts in New York as a public utility, which enables them to kind of have a lower standard if they need a variance, for example. So they are treated as a public necessity. There are certain things that also are beyond the scope of what the planning board can consider under the Telecommunications Act, such as RF radiation. That's one that people will typically raise at a public hearing, but that as long as they are in compliance with FCC regulations, then there's nothing for us to do on that front. And I believe there are some, I saw at least one in here, that there's the FCC compliance certificate on that. So I think as far as the planning board goes, you're looking at site plan, obviously, and these are in the right of way, so there's probably not a lot you can do on that except for the location, color, aesthetic considerations, basically. And then the town board's going to be faced with some other considerations as they look at this special use permit. So.
Thank you. Having said that, does the board have any other general questions before we invite the applicant to come up and explain it to us? Go ahead.
What's the date of the town board?
The town board public hearing?
Yes.
So I think that's 22nd.
22nd?
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it'll be before your meeting, before your hearing.
And with the special use permit, they're approving the use,
Right.
and we're getting more into the aesthetics of it.
Correct.
Okay.
The typical site plan considerations.
Do we have limitations as to how long we can take to decide this? Or?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So with something colloquially referred to as a shot clock. So the application, I believe, was submitted on February 12th. And I didn't look this up before I came, but I think we're on a 90-day clock. Is that right? The 90-day clock, or it's either 60 or 90. I think I think this one is on a 90-day clock. And so that means, the clock starts right when the application is made, and you have to render a decision before the clock expires, before the deadline. And typically, it's been my experience that as long as you're working diligently, you can negotiate for reasonable extensions of the time.
So aren't we already in trouble if they're not going to rule till the 22nd? Are we in violation of the shot?
No, I thought they said it was up till May. I think it's a 90-day clock is what I saw before.
May 13th.
Yeah,
Oh, May 13th. April, May 13th.
yeah. So that'd be 90 days.
And I'm sorry, when's the board meeting? I wrote down May 13th.
It's
April 22nd is the town board for the special use, and April 28th is the public hearing for the site plan approval.
So May 13th would be the deadline that we'd have to
So we're well,
grant all approvals.
everything goes,
Yep.
we're okay.
One thing that would be helpful for me, at least, I don't know how other people feel, but if whoever is doing the testimony for the applicant, if they could tell us if this is going to be a new pole or if it's going on existing infrastructure, and just tell us what those are.
So these are all new poles. Hence why it has to come to the board for board approvals. If they were on existing poles and they met certain regulations, it wouldn't need approvals
Okay, then what's
per our code.
really be helpful for me is where it's going and why it can't go on the existing
And
utilities.
I think it's going to be important to understand, are these going on municipality streets that are, everything's underground, and why it's got to go in the front versus the back?
Right.
So That's good. So if we can get to those specifics, I think that's going to be the largest question.
So whoever that is.
Okay, so any other questions before we invite the applicant up? So when you come up, please give your name, address, and before you speak, and anybody else that's going to speak with you. Are you it tonight? Okay.
Stephanie.
And just so the public knows, the public is not allowed to participate in this meeting. It's not a public meeting. But if you do have questions after this meeting, or please make sure that Michelle gets those in the town.
Okay.
And there will be a public hearing on this too,
Right,
so.
the next,
yeah.
The 22nd, right?
The
Town Board is 22nd of April is a public hearing on the special use permit, and this board next meets the
28th.
28th, and that'll be a public hearing
March,
on
yeah.
site plan.
March 28th. So if anybody from the public has questions, you have to please submit them to Michelle. Tonight's meeting is not an open public meeting, just so everybody understands. Thank you. So if you could maybe start with the company that you represent, what do they do? What are these services for? How do they benefit, how do they benefit the residents? And are they for the benefit of the resident? Are they for the benefit of other, cell companies to use them? How does that all work? So if you can give us some of that background, and then we can get into those specifics we asked you to try to cover.
Certainly. My name is Stephanie Reinhardt. I represent Crown Castle. Crown Castle is a company that we have a couple of different functions as a company. We have a cell tower side, a larger cell tower side, and we also have a network side that handles fiber and small cell. So I work for the network side and handle fiber and small cell. We do fiber as enterprise, banks, offices. We do large-scale enterprise too, school districts, universities, hospital systems. And we also do small cell nodes. The small cells we build are on behalf of one of the larger carriers. This particular project is on behalf of Verizon. So the purpose of it was Verizon identified locations throughout Irondequoit where they had issues with coverage or capacity and determined a need for small cells in that area to enhance what was working off of their cell towers. So the selection of the locations where we've placed those small cells or are proposing to place those small cells are for one of those reasons, capacity and coverage. So the 8 new poles that we've proposed today, they're a combination of decorative style poles and new wood poles. The reason we are proposing new pole placements instead of going on the existing poles are our goal is always to go on the existing poles, right? So that's our first priority. It's not always possible. Sometimes there are not existing poles. All the utilities are underground. That is the case for the poles that we've listed as the decorative style poles, the black kind of steel poles. The wood poles are being proposed in areas where there are existing utility above ground. So there are existing wood poles that we initially tried to get on, but were, for one reason or another, denied by RG&E, or because of, one of the situations, or actually, I believe 2 of the situations where we could have gone on a pole, but it would cause disruption through the easements, backyard easements, to 7 or 8 homes along the way. So our solution for those is to propose a new pole.
Can I just ask what the word disruption means for you guys?
We'd have to dig up and replace poles in yards.
You would have to dig a hole in their yard?
Along where the poles are. We'd have to replace all those poles in their backyards in order to
So the
attach.
disruption would be the cost.
The disruption would be we'd have to go into people's backyards and tear up in order to replace the poles.
So what if a resident would prefer to have it in the backyard versus in the front?
We don't-
You'd be open to doing it in the backyard then?
We don't put nodes on private property. We'll only go on the public right of way,
But it's a public right-of-way. I know behind my home, it's a public right-of-way.
not where it needs an easement.
Where the poles are?
It'd be an easement, probably.
To be an
Oh, it's an easement.
It's an easement.
Well, if the other utilities do, why can't you? What's the reason why you don't?
Because anytime we'd need to access it for maintenance, for repair, for any kind of outage, we would need an easement to get there, and we would need it in a timely manner that we wouldn't be able to get through an easement.
Is that correct? If they have an easement, doesn't that give them an easement to repair it?
Well, they would need a new easement in order to access it. They would
Every time.
typically, unless the existing easement provides for other users to use the easement, they would need their own easement in order to access that. But that's how they would access it, they'd have to get an easement.
So they come through and they trim all the trees and everything from the current poles. They don't ask me, they just do it.
Because they have an easement.
Right, so if they
Yeah.
have an easement, why can't they do that?
Because they don't have an easement.
Don't have an easement.
They would have to get one.
I'm asking why they can't. If a neighbor doesn't have it would rather not have a pole in their front yard and have one in the back.
Because we would need an easement for every time we would access the pole.
Yeah, but if you had an easement, you would have access anytime.
You would,
Yeah,
I believe at some point we would need separate ones for maintenance versus repair, is my understanding.
Just get one easement that includes all those criteria.
I can take it back and ask about it. But it's not something we will traditionally do.
So I have my survey in front of me. I have an easement through the side of my yard and the back of my yard because it runs all through. And the easement's an old easement, and it's the Rochester Railroad, RG&E, and it's all the utilities, Spectrum, and nobody from Spectrum ever asked me. It's just Spectrum has an agreement with RG&E, so you would just have to, I'm assuming, get the agreement, and then it ties you on to the easement, I would think.
It
I would
depends,
have-
they would have to do that, or they could get an easement. Do you need to be like, what about the infrastructure for the pole itself? Is that coming in across the wires, or would that be underground?
It depends on the pole.
Okay,
Some are above ground from pole to pole, some are underground.
so you might need an easement, you might need to have the right of that, the whole easement, just like the Spectrum, for example. But you're talking about, you might also need like an access easement from the street through that particular backyard.
Correct.
But if somebody might be willing to give you that as a condition of having the pole be where the wires already are, I mean, maybe that is something that should be considered.
I mean, like I said, it's something I can take back. We traditionally stay away from anything that's an easement for a small cell, just for ease of maintenance and ability to access it in a timely manner.
Can I ask a question about, sorry?
no, go on.
So you said that these small cells are for capacity and coverage. Is there any reason why you couldn't, like, add a tower in some nearby vicinity to take care of those issues? Like, is there no property available to do that, or do they serve a different purpose than a typical tower would?
They do serve a different purpose. So what we've been asked by Verizon to do is small cell, though, not to put up a new tower.
What is the different purpose that they serve? Like, what would a tower serve versus because wouldn't a tower do capacity and coverage also?
It would, on a much larger scale. And it doesn't, so the small cell helps get into areas where maybe the tower doesn't cover, or if there's a capacity issue, meaning, certain things are overloaded because of the tower, it will alleviate some of that disruption in the network. So these are smaller, efficient, cost-effective ways to bring those, to alleviate those issues.
I apologize because I didn't have I'm just pinch hitting, so I didn't look in depth at the plans. Are there like engineering studies that show the need for these particular small cells in the materials?
So Verizon has those. I don't necessarily have those. I would have to go to Verizon and see if they could provide
Because
something
typically
like that.
when Verizon presents, they show all that data with the propagation and the,
Like this much.
so I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't ask for that, but.
No, I mean, no, they usually
get
come.
that information.
Because that helps to determine really the kind of the need and establish the,
I can check with Verizon and see if that's something they could provide us. We don't necessarily always get that. Like, I wouldn't necessarily get that.
I think that I think we would want it.
I can certainly,
Which of these applications is going through on the decorative pole?
so there are 3. The one on Lake Terrace, the one at 233 Pinecrest, and the one at 7 Leland.
So if you,
Pinecrest, you said, I'm sorry.
233 Pinecrest.
so where you're putting up the new poles, potentially you would then have a pole and have access now to charge other people to put up antennas.
Verizon, she's asking.
Like you now would have a new pole
Correct.
and have a pole there for potentially having other people rent your pole.
So we'd only the one antenna on the pole, and we do, if there is an opportunity to co-locate with other carriers, we do try to do that.
But you're not gonna do it with other poles that are,
We do. So ones that are on existing utility poles, we will co-locate on those as well.
did you contact RG&E and have that, because there talks about having someone go out and check the poles for you? and-
Yep.
And they said it wasn't possible, even having a pole replacement at that particular site? Or was it just because of the easements?
So for what particular
Was it
site? Sorry.
strictly the easements that were the issue?
Is the issue, let me try.
Sorry.
Okay. Is the issue because it was on an easement that you wouldn't put it on the pole, or because RG&E said you couldn't put it on the pole?
It was because of disruption to, we'd have to, like I said, replace, I believe it was 7 poles along the way, and that, the disruption to yards. We would prefer not to do.
They couldn't put them on the existing poles, that's what she's asking.
We would have to replace all of the poles.
Why is that? Why would you have to
That-
replace all the poles?
That was our Janie's specification.
But you would only be using one pole. What would be on the other
Correct.
6 poles?
Whatever was currently there. They would have to be, so they would have for uplift issues. Because if you replace a pole, one pole more than one size bigger than the pole next to it, so essentially they go in 5 feet. So if you're replacing one pole and increasing that footage by 10 feet, the other poles are now 10 feet short, so it has to be within 5 feet. So all those poles then have to get replaced as well.
Is that because there's regulations that say what has to be at the top and so on? Like, I don't understand why you couldn't put, I don't know, you couldn't have a tall pole, but the wires are lower.
Because then the wires would drop too low, and they wouldn't, the midspan would be too low, and they wouldn't, like, that's not acceptable. We can't do that. That's a utility standard.
So are you stringing wire from pole to pole? That
In
was
some
never-
situations, we have fiber from pole to pole.
Most of the time, we've approved these cans and they were held independent and weren't attached to something else.
So this is for fiber, you said it was for small cell, but you're also running fiber line?
So that's how we will access our small cell. We do have a fiber line that goes to our small cell. The ones that are on existing utility poles, it's just as simple, our fiber's already on the pole, we just drop our antenna down to our fiber attachment. The ones that we are attaching new poles, or, proposing new poles to that we would attach a small cell to, we would have to run fiber to. Some of those would come from underground, some of those would be pole to pole.
So Stephanie, I want to make sure you understand why we're asking these
Yep.
questions. We've gotten a lot of comments from residents.
I understand.
And it's not that we don't understand why the service is required and, you know, the whole act that's in place and all of that. But it's not real clear to me why you're not taking all the effort to, if municipalities have put everything underground, why in the world do we want to start putting poles above ground again? And then in 20 years, 50G comes out, and we're going to have to put, more poles. It just doesn't make sense. But if you can conform to where poles currently are, behind houses and in right-of-ways, that would seem to be the logical thing to do from a municipality and for residents. I'm just trying to understand why you're saying they just don't do it.
I understand. Part of it is also because we're given a very specific location by Verizon where they would like the small cell to be. And we only have so much space around that location to select where that proposed small cell could be. So we do have to work within those confines of what we're given. And so sometimes there's either just not an acceptable pole that we can use in that area. Sometimes, there's a wood pole in that area, say, but it's not something that, based on what's on the pole, that it would be denied by RG&E. They have a category of things that they deny poles for. And some of these locations where our decorative poles are proposed, there are no above-ground poles.
Right,
All
but
the
there
utilities
is-
are underground.
But there's other utilities behind.
And that goes back to the
But why
easement
can't you
where we're
run
not
your
gonna go.
fiber underground?
We do,
Oh, you do?
yes, in those, yeah.
Okay, but you still have to put a pole.
We
So
would still put a
I'm
pole.
just going to use my street as an example. I have nothing on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's underground. But behind me, There's all kinds of telephone poles, spectrum, cable. Why can't you go back there? Not that my street's a question here, but
Because those are also the easements, the private property, and that
so
we
it
would
all
need
goes back to
easements.
this whole, your company's rule on easements, there's nothing in the law that says they can't pursue this.
Yeah, so I think what they would want is, so like, I'm looking here, there's instructions for wireless pole attachment agreements that RG&E and NICEAG have. Like, I guess we want to know that you've really exhausted the ability to use the RG&E poles. Like, I don't know if there's something already in the record. If not, I think they're going to want to see, what is RG&E's response? If it's just a matter of convenience that you want to use the front yard, then that's one thing. But if you can get an easement, because if it were me and it was a choice between a pole in my right-of-way in front of my yard or I had wires behind, I'd grant you the easement if I could. So if there's an ability to put the equipment on a backyard pole, I think that would be something we want to make sure we know why you can't do that, whether it's the private easement or give us something from RG&E that says this is why you can't use this pole.
So in terms of the other existing poles, we do have that in terms of when we submitted our building application. One of the things that we do submit with it is within I believe, 200-foot radius of other utility poles, and why those were excluded.
But these are only, like, we're talking here about these are only 8 applications. Like, we're not talking about here, we're not talking about those other ones where you have used the existing poles.
Correct.
So we want to know why you can't use existing poles for these 8 sites.
For these 8, when we submitted our building applications, we submitted that with it. Documentation.
So it's already in the
It
record.
is. I will say the ones, if there are poles in a backyard, those
Let's make
we
sure,
exclude
let's
it
make
as part of
sure
the
that
easement.
that there's information for all
Exclude
8
the
poles.
She said they excluded the poles in the backyard if they were in a right-of-way. They didn't look at them.
If they were in an easement, not in the right-of-way.
Well, I think we want to know why you can't use an easement.
Okay.
And also in the record, or in here, is there a radius on the areas you're trying to cover with any specific cell?
There is not.
So we don't know what Verizon's trying to capture here?
Well, she was going to provide that.
We need to,
That's what you're
I think we asked to provide the propagation data and all those maps that we usually see when we see a tower.
asking. Can I ask one more question, too? So where you're going to put, not the decorative poles, but the wood poles, that means that there's other wood poles in the area, but you're going to add another one? Or no? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So where you're going to put new wood poles? It's because there's already wood poles in the
Correct.
area.
Correct.
But they're not going to go next to them, they're going to just be an additional pole added?
They'll be near them because we need it to be able to bring power to them.
You're going to run the fiber line, is what you're,
We would run fiber, we'd have to run power overhead too.
and those are going to be where there's no poles existing? No, you're only putting wood where there is existing
Correct.
poles? Okay.
The decorative would be the ones that we're putting where there are not above-ground
I'm just
utility
trying to
poles.
understand the visual. Is it going to just be like a sole pole that's going to have one wire running to it?
Pretty much.
And then there's other wires, poles around that got all kinds of wires on them? I'm just
Correct.
asking.
Correct.
Okay, 'cause I mean,
119.
residents are going to ask these questions, so.
I understand.
On the 119 application and Crest, map C4 shows an existing pole. Is that, you're not using that?
Which,
What are you looking at, Alan?
sorry, which one?
It's 119 Pinecrest. I don't know what page number it is, but if I look on your maps, C4, it looks like this. That's just a pole, so you're showing?
That's our proposed pole.
That's not what it's labeled at. It's
I see
existing
that.
pole.
That's our proposed pole.
So it's mislabeled here?
That would appear, yes.
Okay, then these are gonna need to get redone, so they show us what you guys have. This is proposed, not existing, right?
That is a proposed, yes.
Okay,
Right across the street from the existing pole.
Correct.
The existing pole is not in,
So on C4, where are you putting this pole?
I got the right one.
Well, this is just a blank.
Ellen, what page were you looking at, the existing?
I have
pole?
no idea.
Oh.
It's labeled C4. It's part of their
Elevations in detail.
elevation and their site plan stuff. It starts off with this.
So in the other, on C3, it says replacement / new pole location, pole to be determined. But that doesn't indicate, isn't that where that pole's going,
That
Stephanie?
is where that pole is going. Yep.
So I'm sorry again, could you tell us again, Michelle, what you're saying?
On C3,
Yep.
for 119 Pinecrest, in the site plan diagram, it shows a pole, and it's got a notation, replacement / new pole location, pole to be determined.
I think pole number to be determined.
Oh, pole number, excuse me.
So there could
Got the
be
wrong
more
one.
than one?
No, it's just that pole.
Probably like an identification number, like Shelley said.
119, oh,
Get the other pine crest.
I had the other Pinecrest thing.
Oh, it's 119, sorry.
No, that was me.
Okay, so that's not correct. I've not gone through all the packet, to be honest with you, and I will before you see us again. But some things like that, telling me an existing pole, then I'm assuming you're using an existing pole.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I hadn't caught that myself, so
Is there anything else like that that I should look at?
I hope not.
I did notice on the Waterford re-emissions compliance reports, it's got the site East Rochester.
It does. The antenna is the same. So we had done it as a standardized we also did a project in East Rochester. The antenna, it's the same antenna that we're utilizing for these sites.
But it should say Arundequite though, correct me if I'm wrong? Or no, I don't understand.
So this is like you tested these antennas at another site, and that's the certification.
Correct.
So when these are installed, you will be supplying the town with a certification from these towers that certify that they're FCC compliant, is that right?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think you should, because that,
Within the building, if they're,
well, so they
Now?
haven't built, so you can't give us a certification for a pole that's not constructed yet, is that right?
Correct.
So you've given us like an example that these antennas were tested and they qualified for this other site. So we would like, I think, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're in compliance with the RF, because people are concerned about that. So
Yep,
we want to make
understood.
sure that we're compliant with the FCC.
Is there a reason that you're putting up wooden poles instead of metal poles everywhere, since you're just putting up poles anyway?
Because there are existing wood poles in that area. The point of the decorative poles are in the area where there are no existing above-ground utilities, so there's no poles. So instead of just putting a random wood pole here and there, we had proposed a metal pole. And one of the comments from the board at the planning board at the last planning board meeting was, could they potentially be streetlights as a way to, and yes, they can. So we could do those as streetlights instead.
Pays for the street light power?
We would pay for we would take care of that. That maintenance would be on us.
Yeah, it's only gonna be one street light or two, like on Pinecrest.
No, but somebody's gonna pay for it forever, right?
Well, right, but you're only gonna have, it's gonna, I don't know, to me, it would be a little odd that you only have two light poles.
Yeah, I
On
guess
the
I just
street.
wanna go back, if we're just putting in poles anyway, why aren't they all the decorative ones?
To be consistent with what's there, I think that's
They're trying to do.
what they're trying to do.
Pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe that it's to be consistent, so it's like, oh, this street all has wood poles, and
So
then,
use one of those.
So, I got another question on the decorative pole. I guess decorative is in the eye of the beholder, but when you look at those poles, they are slim and so forth, but are there other options? Do you have other types of decorative poles? Meaning, I go in some municipalities, they make them look like trees, right? They look horrendous to me, but they do try to do that. Do you have anything else in these kind of situations? Decorative?
That is kind of the standard that we use in order to house the equipment we
Do you
needed to
use-
house.
Do others use different?
I can't answer that. I just know
Or the
what we would
industry in
use.
general, or-
I assume there's variations on it. This is what we use to house our equipment.
Are we allowed, I'm going to ask legal, are we allowed to ask if there's,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know
Like to
if
see
the
what else is
industry
out there.
has other poles available,
With the actual antennas up.
just so that residents could have some kind of a say, hopefully, of what they would prefer. I'm trying to make this easier for you.
Is there, how you guys are gonna set the area that you are digging a hole, what you're gonna do about putting it back so it's the same?
It will fully restore it to how we
Is
found
that
it.
written somewhere in these plans?
I did them a long time ago. I don't recall if it's in those
If it's
plans, but we
not-
will restore it to how we found it.
If it's not, can you put that in there?
Yes.
If I'm noticing,
You can make that a condition to
Yeah.
approval.
I would rather it just be on there, not as a condition. On 124 Winedale, that seems to be in front of that stop sign. Is that where you intended?
It is in front of it. It's a little bit in front of it. It's not directly in front of it. It's in front and back a little bit, so you would still be able to see the stop sign.
How many feet is that sight line then with the pole in front of it?
I don't have the footage. Sorry, 8 feet.
8 feet
It'd be 8 feet.
is the sight line, so I'd be 8 feet before I knew there was a stop sign.
It'd be 8 feet in front of and back from the stop sign.
Okay, but what is the, if I'm driving down the street, when am I gonna make contact with that, or that pole's gonna be irrelevant altogether?
The pole should be set back far enough that it would be irrelevant.
Okay. And all these are gonna meet the setback on the town for anywhere they touch a sidewalk?
Yes,
Okay.
Very reasonable.
Do
yes.
these
they-
decorative poles require maintenance? Do they stay decorative or stay, or do they peel or,
They should not, but we do maintain all of our plant.
Can I go back to a question? I think you asked it. So there's this huge pole right behind Town Hall here. And there's nothing that can be done to add to that pole to cover these spots? That's what Verizon's saying, or what? Because you're going by what Verizon's
Most
saying.
of these seem like they're on the.
Correct. I don't know who's on that tower. I don't know if that's a Verizon tower. Again, this is all for Verizon's request. So I'd have to go talk to them and see what information they could provide. Assuming though this is from their request, this is what they feel is necessary.
Right, and the option is not to put a bigger tower where one already exists,
Correct.
because,
Because we can do this on a much smaller level.
so it's a cost issue.
It's a cost issue, but it's also an efficiency issue, right? These are small and they are efficient in what they do to cover the gaps and the issues that Verizon has instead of putting up a new cell tower somewhere.
No, I'm not saying new cell tower, a current existing cell tower, just make it larger.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what Verizon had intended for, or if Verizon is even on this particular cell, or in general.
Is that what you were asking, is why can't the current towers have a?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily current tower, but, if there's another solution that doesn't involve putting poles in people's front yards, is there a site for a tall, like 120-foot pole would solve all these problems? But you said, though, that they're different, they serve different purposes, so I don't really understand what the different purposes are and why. I guess we would like to know, have that explained. So kind of, we'd like to see kind of the engineering as to why, the science reason for why we need these poles where they are. And then also explain to us why there can't be a site somewhere that has a single pole that, addresses all these coverage and capacity issues. and explain why they serve different purposes. I think that would be very helpful for this board and the public.
Why they serve different purposes, small cell versus tower?
And why can't a tower, address these issues if there was a site? I don't know, maybe there might not be a site available in this location.
And that's entirely possible. They may not be able to upgrade their existing one. Like I said, I don't know without talking to them, and I will certainly reach out to them. These are designed to work off of the existing towers, right? So they work off the existing towers and enhance that service.
So you don't have any towers in the town of Arundel, because you said you also do cell towers, right, if I remember?
A portion of the company does.
Right, do they have any towers in
I
Arundel?
don't know. I don't handle the tower side. I'd have to look into that. I can look into that and see.
I think it's kind of crossing over, isn't it?
It'd have to be like a Verizon tower on it.
Oh,
Correct. We may have built it, but it would be the utilities or Verizon, the
and
carriers that were on
They don't
it.
share? Is-
They do share.
Oh, they do share?
Oh, yeah.
They will co-locate.
Usually codes have a preference for co-location.
And it could be that those are at capacity as well, which is why we need the small cells.
So speaking of, sorry, I don't need to talk that much during clan games like this, but,
Go away.
so these small cells, did you say you would allow co-location on these?
We will.
How is that gonna look if you add, what would that look like?
It doesn't change the appearance at all. It would just, so we actually do have another project behind this one, not for any pole sets, but it would be on our existing antennas already that we've set through T-Mobile. And so it would just be an additional radio we would put in our cabinet that's already on the
It's
pole.
already in an existing cabinet, it's
Yep.
not like another,
It's not another additional item.
Okay.
It's not another array. It's not, it's within our existing equipment.
The one thing that I want to look for here, and I'm not saying that we're proving anything, but I would like to see the box, your cabinet, if the street if it's on the west side and the street's going south, that box be on the south side of that pole, so it's not visible as you're driving through it. And as far as color goes, as long as it matches the pole, I don't know what else we're gonna match. So if it's black, it's black. I don't know how anybody else feels about that. If it's wood, I want something that looks like that.
Yep, we certainly have, we can put the box, we try to, typically if there's a pole that's closer to a driveway, we do try to put the box on the opposite side, just to avoid any, people prefer it on the opposite side of their house or whatnot. But we can put it wherever and paint it whatever.
We did something similar before, didn't we?
Yeah, if you go on, I don't know where it was, but
Over the street.
if you were heading south on, I think Seneca, those are on the south side of that pole, though,
But they painted them a certain color too, didn't they, if I remember?
Match.
Yeah, to
match
the pole.
the,
I believe they were decorative and you had the match, the grayish color.
Yeah.
I think it was.
but those went on existing poles.
No, those were new poles.
Yeah, I mean, we've done several of these over the years. I'm not looking for much else except for the community engagement on this. And have you held any meetings with the community just to explain what you're doing?
We have not, we've been going kind of through this process.
You're going to get surprised next week because you haven't talked to anybody.
I've talked to a couple of people already, and tried best I could to explain what we were doing and, address any kind of 5G concerns that there are. But yes.
Back to Windale, or Windale, I took a picture, I drove by it yesterday, there's a brand-new pole there. You can see the dirt around it. In the right-of-way.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
It's one of the larger poles.
That's gonna be-
The opposite, the stop sign.
It's the opposite side, but it's a brand-new pole. There's nothing on it. It's brand new, it's a big one. It's a larger size one. It's in the right-of-way, it wouldn't even make sense. Why?
Cones are still there and the dirt is turned over, so it was just installed.
I don't believe that was, I certainly hope that wasn't us, because we have been through this process, I'd have to,
It's their pole?
No,
Oh.
it's just a brand,
It's an RG&E pole.
brand new pole.
I hope that's not the case.
so too.
It's one of the bigger ones, so, and it's in the right of way, so.
It's one of the,
And the sign's
a huge-
across the street, that's the one that's in front of the
So-
stop sign, so it doesn't even make sense why. it wouldn't
so we
be-
may not have known that pole was going to be placed if it's a new RG&E pole. If it is,
So that's why.
we would
to me, it's
try and get on that pole.
important that you do your due diligence to make sure that the poles,
Really can't do it.
yeah.
oh, I agree.
And it's important to me that you show us that, or that we see something, because the thought of you now, in return, going and then making money off of other people to use your pole, that, to me,
No,
I wanna know that
I
you
agree.
can't use those poles. I also wanna know definitely that you can't, the easements are not possible, because I know that the residents would allow you to do that. I have easement, I know that RG&E has the easement, and I know that Spectrum gets on my property, Spectrum gets on everybody's property. We all allow Spectrum on our property, and if it has to do with those being on the pole, people are gonna allow it.
Yeah, I will definitely
I
take that back.
have to assume that in other places that you guys have gotten past that.
I don't know, because we definitely stay away from poles in the private right-of-way and the easements. As for the new pole, at the time we had submitted these
Say
requests,
what
there
you
was,
said again? You stay away from what?
we have always stayed away from poles in the private right-of-way and through easements.
Okay.
Again, for the realistic possible, like, we're not able to access them as easily if we need an easement every time.
Yeah, but you don't need an easement every time. It would just, the easement,
We
you-
have in some areas, we need an easement for every time we would need to access.
yeah, you would need one easement that is good for every time you need to go there.
In certain areas, we would need it for every
Like, you need to get a new one?
time we
Yeah,
would
that-
need to access the pole.
That doesn't make any sense. What about green light? I think my understanding is that green light went on these poles in the backs of these yards. How did
For
they get there?
fiber. You don't need it for fiber.
Okay.
We wouldn't need it for, only for the nodes.
So how long, the whole process obviously doesn't happen overnight. So to Shelley's point, when's the last time you spoke to RG&E about these poles?
They have to.
Was it like a year ago, or is it 6 months ago, or?
Spoke about the poles that we were denied on, or that we are not, so
I mean, it's obviously a long process, right?
it is a long process. We've started this process 2 years ago now.
That's what I had a feeling.
They have a website where there's applications, and it shows, the Public Service Commission has a website that shows the applications for pole attachments. So you guys would have had an application on there?
For a new pole, or
No,
for
attachments.
any poles that we've applied for, we've gone through RG&E.
Can you supply those, like, applications and the denials as part of this process?
Because apparently now, everybody has to show the application and the list of like
This stuff.
how long it's been
She gave it this to
at the
Yes.
site. So you guys would be on there for your polls?
I don't know, some of them, like, some of these are, we applied for 2 years ago. I don't believe they were doing that 2 years ago necessarily. But we have the documentation of why we may have been rejected on the site. To be honest, not all of these are gonna have a rejection. Like, we knew the ones that are in the decorative locations, we are going to have to request to set poles because there were no poles. But where there were existing poles that we tried to get on, yes, I can provide those rejections.
The Public Service Commission or whatever just passed some new thing in
Correct.
2024 that
In
was supposed to make
September, I
it
believe. Yeah.
easier for attachments and getting past that kind of stuff, so I don't know if things would be easier now, like keeping in mind with the shot clock and stuff that RG&E can't delay you either,
Correct.
so.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, like I said, with this new pole that you mentioned on Windale, when we submitted this, I do not believe that pole was there.
Can you resubmit?
If we know it's an RG&E pole that we could go on, we could look into that, certainly. I mean, because to your point, we don't want to necessarily put, a pole 2 feet from a pole that was just placed there.
So in the past, what we did, there were little circular cans, basically. Is this actually the representation of how they're all going to look?
That is just the decorative.
So how is that gonna look different than on the wood ones?
The wood one, it's on an arm. So the antenna is on an arm on the side of the pole,
How far up?
25-ish feet.
There's no box with it.
There is a cabinet.
There is a, so can we see what that looks like too?
Yep, I can certainly send you
And that's gonna be a double one?
a double antenna.
Yeah.
It'll have 3 arrays.
I think we want to see it, so we know.
Yeah.
I can certainly supply that.
We don't have that in this package. Do we?
Just a hand drawing.
Yeah, I think it's just a rough,
I'm on C3 of the very first one, Mayfair Drive. What's the advantage of putting the new pole across the street from the existing poles?
we can run power.
Why not put it next to the ones that are already there? If we're trying to blend them with the aesthetic of the neighborhood, why would I cross the street, run overhead power across the street where there is none, instead of putting it on the same side of the street where the existing ones are? And you clearly have access because they're right in the backyard. And you could park a truck with a bucket and never even go on the property and reach the existing poles. So even if you had to put a new pole, I think mirroring the existing would make more sense than crossing the road.
I think it depends on the location on the site. I don't know what is specific at those sites, if there's drainage, if there's something else there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking
But I'd have to look at it, but we certainly could.
looking at the street view, looking at everything. The side you're on actually has the fire hydrant, so there's got to be water on the side you're proposing versus the opposite side. So it just seems that there's no reason to run across the street overhead, get in line with the existing poles. There is absolute wood poles there.
I think it's just in an effort to keep with an existing pole line too.
Yeah.
Right, if we're already kind of running with that, where the easement goes in the back of the pole line, it's just in an effort to keep with the pole line that's existing.
Can I go back to some of your simulation photos?
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you're not simulating what it's going to look like that's on the left-hand side in the actual picture?
I don't know. I don't know why those were not included in
'Cause
these
otherwise,
drawings,
you get confused with, is that an existing pole?
especially because it's labeled an existing pole, yeah.
Right.
Yes. So, I don't know why those were not, the photo sims were not included with the antenna on it. We do normally request that,
We'll be
so,
able to update that before you come back?
yep, I can certainly have that included in there. But what is to the left of it is just kind of a rough drawing or a sketch of what it would look like if that were the actual.
So what's the size of the cabinet that's going on? Is that at the bottom of the pole? How much big?
I think it references 6 foot up.
But how big is it?
They are, there's a page in here that shows, maybe not. Thought there was a page in here that showed.
It's okay, you can bring it back the next time.
Yep, I surely will. There's varying sizes. There, some of them are a couple feet, 3 feet.
Then there's gonna be varying sizes for each one of these?
No, it'll be standard,
Okay.
with the exception of the decorative poles, where if in the proposed mock-up, right, that generic photo, it's all what you see on the pole. It's either on the pole or within the pole, and that would be what we would build. There's not an additional cabinet on that.
Okay. And then to go back to Nate's example of Mayfair, you're telling me then there are existing poles where you're putting this new pole?
They're across
A
the street.
pole line across the street.
That's why they're putting a wood one, because there's already existing wood ones. But those other ones can't hold what they want to put
Right,
on.
but even
Well,
if
if
they
I'm
just-
doing a
I just
brand
wanna
new
make sure
pole on
I'm
a
accurate.
road that doesn't have any other poles, it's not blending in with anything else, right?
The pole across the street.
They're
So we
putting
should-
wood poles on ones where they have wood poles on the street.
Okay.
There are poles directly across the street from that location.
Yeah.
But why not put it with those, is what I was saying.
No, I agree with that. That's what I would
No
prefer
reason
to
to
see.
cross the street and have an independent pole on that
And
lone
if
side.
that were the case, they wouldn't even need to talk to us.
No, they're both on the right. Either side.
Just a formality, right?
It would still be a new pole set though, right? Like if we
That's
had to set
okay.
the new pole.
new pole next to old poles, but you're not crossing a street with overhead wires, you're not. That would truly blend in. That's what I'm existing.
It is.
That time of life.
Any other questions? John, go ahead.
Stephanie, this probably gets more into the RF stuff of it. What's like the approximate coverage area for one of these cells, you know, like diameter-wise? We talking quarter mile, half mile?
I believe it's a quarter mile, but I can double check.
Because, you know, a few of these, you know, they're in residential neighborhood streets, but they're not far from like main thoroughfares like St. Paul or Titus. You know, is there any way where we could, you know, if we're only talking a couple 100 feet, can we move some of these facilities to those streets where you already have existing overhead utility lines, whatnot, you know, and you can just, whether you're putting a new pole in or going off one of the existing ones, you know, it blends in better.
Yeah, so we have a number of poles already on those streets on St. Paul that we have proposed or are placing antennas on already. St. Paul in particular is a difficult one because we're not allowed on one side of the road basically for small cell because of utility regulations. There's equipment on those lines that we can't just go on, precludes us from going on those poles. But also because of that, we're limited to the poles we can go on. So then we have to worry about, are we putting an antenna too close to an existing one? So we have to make sure we're not overlapping too much with our existing or somebody else's existing plant.
So before you said that Verizon was dictating where they wanted the poles, are they just giving you an area?
They give us, I believe it's like 25 meters within, here's the area we want it. Find a pole or find a location within 25 meters. And then if we can't find that, we do expand a little bit. And if we still can't find something, then
So you pick the best out of that area?
correct.
Okay. So, but out of that area, some of it could fall into what John's asking, possibly. But you've already looked at it supposedly, so.
It's possible, but we know, what is where from at least Verizon side because they've given us the information of where they exist.
But you'd be able to tell us, in John's case, like if it was close to St. Paul, why it can't go on St. Paul?
Correct.
Which we don't necessarily have in this information, but you'd be able to tell us when you came back. Okay. That would satisfy you, right, John? Any other questions for Stephanie? I think due to the fact that we're on the, what do you call it, the shot clock, it might be important to go over, Michelle, what your notes show, to make sure that they match what you have, and if you have something she missed, let's make sure we got a complete list, so that we make sure nothing gets delayed, if you don't mind.
Not at all, not at all. So I have submit why these serve different purposes. Submit engineering as to why the poles are needed. I did have regrade restore sites to existing grading, but we did find that on the plans.
That is in the plan.
It is on the plan, so I'll scratch that one off. Does Crown Castle have any other pole options? Submit notification from RG&E regarding existing poles at these locations can't be used. So I think that might be a duplicate. Submit why we can't use an existing easement for backyard poles. Provide propagation data. Update existing site plans to depict correct photo simulations. Submission of re-emissions compliance report if approvals are received with building permit applications. I added on. Install box on side of pole away from street. Paint boxes same as pole colors. Hold,
I'm going to stop you on the one before that.
sure.
It's not away from the street, it's facing the same direction as the traffic is flowing. So if the
So,
traffic's going south,
side of pole facing,
the pole is on the south, or if traffic's going north, the pole is on.
They're actually depicted that way. It says traffic flow right in the,
Yeah.
but that's for the box, not for the arm of the antenna, because that's 90 degrees from the box. So now you have the arm sticking out at 25 feet up with the antennas on it that you do see versus the box on the opposite side of
Do
traffic.
they have to be separated that way?
They don't have to be separated that way.
All right.
The box, we have more flexibility with the box than we do the antenna.
Okay, I would prefer prefer to see it that way. I don't know.
So install antenna
The box, the cabinet.
cabinet.
Anything that is attached to that pole should, in my opinion, I would prefer to see it on the same side
Same flow as traffic.
as traffic.
Flow direction is
That's what I just
traffic.
asked you, maybe my question wasn't really clear.
So I have to take that one back to the engineering team because I'm not sure that we can do that with the antennas. I know for, azimuth purposes, it has to be in a specific location, and there's only so much flexibility that it has to move from that location.
Because of the interference of the box?
The interference of the box and the interference of making sure it's pointing in the correct direction it needs to be pointing in.
If they could just have that for us, that would be great.
I will take that, and if they can't, I will provide reason why they can't.
Okay, and then we were good with paint boxes, same pole colors?
Yeah, I think they should just match the poles, that's what the lines are.
I have hold a community engagement meeting, supply applications and denials from RG&E, which I believe is a duplicate. Look into new pole across from 124 Windale site. Submit drawing of boxes being installed. Submit coverage capacity, possibly move poles closer to existing towers. From John, right?
Existing roads with overhead lines, towers already.
Main thoroughfares.
Yeah.
And I think Kate has something to add.
Oh, I got one, if I could.
Oh,
The
yep.
one that you brought up about, is there another location for a pole versus having to put 8 new poles? Is that, did you already do that one?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you got that right.
The use of a tower, you're saying?
the use of a tower instead of 8 poles.
Yeah, but that kind of goes to the question of what different purpose does this serve? Because that's kind of how we started.
Can a tower be placed someplace? Right? I guess it goes along with number 1. Go ahead, Kate,
My
I'm sorry.
recollection is you can't put these behind trees, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. But you have 25 meters around any of them that you'll still be able to create the same service structure that is required by Verizon?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
Do you have any of these already in Rondequoit?
we do.
Can you tell me the location so I can look at it?
Sure. They can send a list that we've already built. I just want to confirm what is actually built at this point.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think that this was sort of touched upon at the beginning, and these are obviously all connected, but potentially provide maps of the existing service coverage and then what the projected service coverage will be. I think that would be helpful in terms of rationale for why the poles are needed. And then also, it'll give you proximity, so that I think that will be helpful as well.
Did you have any we missed?
No, I don't think so.
Go ahead, John.
One item, but not for the applicant. Perhaps some input from the town public works department, because these will be all going in town right away, so I'm sure they're gonna have a say on what can go underground and any permitting that would be needed, restoration, stuff like that.
Good one. Have they been engaged on this? Okay. And I never even thought to ask this. When are you gonna start and when do you wanna be done by?
Well, it would depend on when we're permitted.
But, I mean, what's your desired start date when you know?
So we'd like to be done this year. It's dependent upon,
Start as soon as possible and done by this year?
done by the end of this year, yeah.
I'll also add that, I mean, you know better than I do, but I would assume that all this information that the board is asking for will be able to be turned around fairly quickly, because I'm assuming that Verizon has already done all this analysis. Because they're the individuals who chose where these were going to go. So hopefully Verizon can provide you their analysis, and I think that will help the group in terms of siting for each of these poles.
Yeah, I will reach out to them or have our RF engineer reach out to them tomorrow and ask for them to expedite this information so I can get it as soon as possible.
And you could send that just via email?
Sure, when, that kind of goes to my, when,
Yeah, so the
How do
meeting.
you want all of
Yeah, well, the meeting's the 28th, so I'd like to get it to the board at least by the 22nd of April. So that they have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days to review before the meeting. Are you guys okay with that? Is the board?
When's our meeting?
The 28th.
April 28th. When's the town board?
22nd.
The 22nd.
Yeah.
The
If we could have it sooner,
Clock.
that would be better.
I will do my best to get this all to you as soon as I can get it.
Any other questions? I think that's it for today.
All right.
We have, John has one. Go ahead, John.
Just thinking aloud, maybe for some of these locations, if they're close to anything, like a public facility, like a firehouse, can we try to put some on roofs there? I don't know, this might be for the attorney. I don't know if this gets into like parkland alienation, but, one of the sites was right down the street from a town park. If they put a pole on a town park, at least it's on a park and not in front of a house, but I don't know how
Yeah,
parkland
you probably
alienation.
should run into an alienation issue, but if there's a right-of-way in front of the park, that would be different.
Because I think the one on 7 Leland is got a park right down the street on the corner of St. Paul. But then there's also existing overhead poles on St. Paul, so you could also locate it there.
I think that probably is out of the coverage area for Verizon at that point.
If we're only talking a couple 100 feet, if the coverage area is quarter mile to a half a mile.
But the coverage area, but where is the center of the
That's
coverage
fair.
area?
I just thought of another item. She needs to update the specs, where it says existing
Yep,
pole.
I've got that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you have that?
I had that.
Oh, okay, you got that, okay. And you mentioned firehouses, so wasn't there a big thing with the St. Paul Fire Department? They put a big antenna on top of that,
It was a tower, I believe.
It was tower.
and that can't be used, that's not yours.
I don't know. I don't know the towers. I just know we've been tasked to request small cells, so.
I'm going back in memory on that one, but anyway. There was some controversy, so I'll be quiet. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
John, you got something?
Yeah,
We haven't-
see you, thank you.
We haven't adjourned yet.
But I'm just getting back to this whole coverage area here. So if the coverage area is 25 meters, meters just over 3 feet, we're talking 75 feet. Most property is going to be over 100 feet deep. So how much is really one of these areas really serving in terms of, say, houses? If you put it right in the middle of the street, maybe you're getting the 2 houses that you're in front of and the 2 across the street. But, you go to the other ends,
That's not the coverage area, so that's where they're proposing has the center
Okay.
of where they want to put the node to cover their coverage area.
So once that pole's in though, what is that diameter though?
I have that because I want to double check that, so,
Okay.
I believe it's upwards of like quarter mile,
Okay.
Because these things just hand each other off, like,
correct. They work off one another.
I guess I know what you're doing in the night.
You're not on vacation, right?
Not anymore.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions, or Michelle, anything else? Peter, anything else you want to?
No, I think we covered mine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're done for the evening. I propose we adjourn.